A passed pawn is a pawn that doesn't have any enemy pawns on its adjacent file, and because of that it cannot be captured, as well as it does not have any enemy pawns on its own file that can block the advance of this pawn on this file. So here, as you can see, this H pawn is a passed pawn. Similarly, if you see, black has one more passed pawn, and that is the E pawn, because this E pawn is not blocked by any of the white's pawn on the same file, as well as there are no enemy pawns on the adjacent files that can capture this pawn. So therefore, in this example, black has two passed pawns, and that is the H pawn and the E pawn. Now let's look into the white's army. White has two pawns here. And can you tell me which one of these is a passed pawn? I'll give you 5 seconds to think. Well, the pawn on the B file is a passed pawn, and the reason is this pawn can advance to the other end of the board because there are no enemy pawns that can block the advance of this pawn, as well as there are no enemy pawns on the adjacent file that can capture this pawn. Although I know you must be wondering that there is a pawn sitting here, so why is this a passed pawn then? The reason why this B pawn is a passed pawn is because this B pawn has passed the C pawn. The C pawn over here cannot capture this B pawn. Therefore, this B pawn is a passed pawn. Now you must be wondering what happens when they reach to the other side of the board. Well, when the pawn reaches the other side of the board, it gets promoted to one of these four pieces, and this move is called as pawn promotion. Now you must be wondering, what is a pawn promotion? Well, when the pawn reaches the other side of the board, the pawn leaves the board and it gets replaced with one of these four strong pieces. Now we can promote the pawn into a bishop. So the pawn has left the board and now the bishop is on the board, or it can promote itself into a rook, or it can promote itself into a knight, or it can promote itself into the most powerful piece of the chess game, and that is the queen. And now after the queen is on the chessboard, this game is an easy win for black. If you want to learn about pawn promotion in detail, then I have already made a video on this topic, the link of which is given in the description box. So because of this pawn promotion move, it becomes very important in the chess game that if you have a passed pawn, then it must be pushed, and if your opponent has a passed pawn, then it must be stopped. So here after black promotes, let's say here white pushes his own pawn, pawn to b6. Now what should black play? Well, black can get his queen to this square and try to stop this pawn by capturing it in the next move, or it can get his queen to this square and attack this pawn so that if the pawn moves forward, it can capture it. So now the queen can come to this square, and now the pawn cannot move forward because it has been blocked. White plays his king, and now black can capture this passed pawn, and now this game is an easy win for black. Now let's understand, why are passed pawns important? First of all, obviously you know, because their ability to promote itself into a piece can completely turn the tables in the endgame. So here white has a passed pawn which black is not able to stop, and because of that white promotes his pawn into a queen and easily win this game with his queen and his king. And the second reason why passed pawns are so important in the game is because sometimes they can control weak squares or important squares or holes in the opponent's territory. So look at this example. I'll give you 5 seconds to think. Can you spot white's passed pawn? Well, white has a passed pawn on D file, and the reason why this is a passed pawn, because there are no enemy pawns on this file, as well as the adjacent files does not have any pawn which can capture this pawn. That is why the D pawn is a passed pawn. So here the D pawn, although has been blocked by the black's knight and it is unable to advance further, but still this passed pawn is important because it is keeping the enemy knight tied up to a job of blocking this pawn, and because of this this knight is not able to do any other activity, any other thing on the board. So whatever black has to do now, he has to do only with his other 4 pieces, because his one piece is busy blocking this pawn. So although this d pawn is not able to advance further, but this is a very important pawn, because now this is controlling key squares in the opponent's territory. And notice, if it was white's turn to move, how the white knight can easily jump on this square and fork both black's queen as well as black's rook. If the rook captures this knight, this pawn can capture back the rook and white would be up in material. Let's see the 3 types of passed pawns that you may see in a chess game. So the first type is protected passed pawn. So a protected passed pawn is a pawn which is protected by one of its own pawn. So here, as you can see, this b pawn is protected by white's c pawn. Since this passed pawn is protected, that is why we will call this b pawn as protected passed pawn. However, if you look at the g pawn, this is standing here alone and is not protected by any of its own pawn. So therefore, this g pawn is a normal passed pawn, while this b pawn is a protected passed pawn. And the reason why this concept is important, because as you already know that a passed pawn is a very dangerous pawn in any endgame. So obviously, if white wants to capture this passed pawn, then he can do so by getting his king to first this square and then to this square, from where it can easily attack this pawn. If black doesn't want to lose this pawn, then he will have to defend with his king, because there is no black pawn that can protect this pawn. However, look at white's game. If black wants to capture this pawn, then he cannot do so because he is protected by the c pawn. So black will first have to capture the c pawn and then the b pawn. So black has to come here, here and then capture this pawn. But if he does so, this pawn will move ahead in the next chance and then the king will not be able to stop. Let's see this concept in action. Let's say white wants to attack this. So he moves his king here. Now black cannot lose his passed pawn, so he gets his king here. White attacks this pawn. Black defends. And now, because the protection of this passed pawn is done by the king, now his king cannot stop the promotion of this pawn, because he has moved to the other side of the board. So now this pawn can easily promote. If the king tries to rush back, he cannot stop the promotion because it's too late. So because this passed pawn was not a protected one, the king had to run for its defense, and because of that he lost the game. But what if black king now doesn't rush to this pawn? He rather tries to attack white's pawn. Then what will happen? Let's see. Black king moves here, white moves here, black moves here. White captures this passed pawn, and now as you can see, black king cannot capture this pawn. He has to first attack the c pawn. So he comes here to attack the c pawn, and now white king comes here, and now is the key moment. Can the black king capture this c pawn? Well, no, because if he does that, then he will lose the game, because this pawn now will run towards the edge of the board and the black king will not be able to stop this pawn. Let's go back a few moves. So this example helps us understand that a protected passed pawn is far better than a single passed pawn. Now let's look at the second type, and those are connected passed pawns. So if there are 2 or more passed pawns on the adjacent files, then those pawns are called as connected passed pawns. So here both of these white pawns are passed pawns, and because they are next to each other, we will call them as connected passed pawns. And the reason why connected passed pawns are so important, because they can march forward in tandem and they would be very difficult to stop by opponent's pieces or by the opponent king. So here in this example, although black is up in material, he has a rook as compared to white's 2 pawns, but this game is completely winning for white because white has connected passed pawns. Because white can now push his a pawn and attack black's rook. If the black rook captures the b pawn, then the a pawn will easily promote into a queen and can win against black's rook. Let's go back a few moves. So when white pushes the a pawn, black cannot capture on b. So what should black do? Black blocks the a pawn. by playing rook to a8. But here now white can play b7. It can march forward as another pawn, attacking black's rook one more time. If the black rook captures on a7, then the b pawn promotes into a queen. And if the black rook decides to stay on the a file, then this case doesn't help either, because white can now promote either of his pawn. Let's say he promotes b pawn into a queen, and now if the black rook captures, the white can recapture this rook with his other pawn and get his queen on the board. So let's go back a few moves. So when you have connected passed pawns in the game, together they can prove stronger than any other opponent's piece. If you are enjoying learning about passed pawns, then do like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's look at the third type of passed pawn, and that is outside passed pawn. An outside passed pawn is a pawn that is several files away from other pawns, and that is why the enemy king, or for matter any other enemy piece, can get deflected to stop this pawn, leaving his other pawns undefended on the board. So here in this situation, black has an outside passed pawn because it is several files away from the other pawns. Now since this pawn is intending to promote white's king, will now have to make sure that this pawn doesn't queen itself. Now because white's king would be busy trying to stop and capture this pawn, black king can get to the other side of the board and start attacking his other pawns and create more passed pawns on this side of the board. Let's see this action. As you can see, white's king is maintaining a direct opposition to the black's king. So the black king is not able to penetrate into white's position. If black king comes to this side, then white can come to this side, again maintaining an opposition so that the black king does not penetrate into white's territory and get to this square from where it can attack this weak pawn. So therefore in this situation, black can make use of his outside passed pawn. So black can now threaten to queen this pawn. White obviously needs to stop. And now since the white king was busy trying to stop this outside passed pawn, he has gone to the other side of the board, leaving these two pawns vulnerable now from black's king attack. So black king starts to move on the other side of the board. White tries to come to defense, but it's too late because black king has reached the pawns, and now black will eat both these pawns and can queen one of these pawns easily and win the game. Let's go back to the starting position. So here is a beautiful example in which you learned how you can beautifully use the power of an outside passed pawn to deflect the enemy king and then entering into your opponent's territory. Here is another example of outside passed pawns. White has two outside passed pawns. One is on the queen side, one is on the king side of the board. And as you can see, black's bishop is keeping an eye on this h8 square and stopping this white pawn to promote on this square. But since white has another outside passed pawn, this pawn can also move forward and queen on this square. But at present, it is being stopped by black's bishop from the advancement of this pawn to this square. So as you can see, this dark square bishop is overloaded with the protection of these two squares. Since it can protect only one square at a time, white can take advantage of this situation. What can white play? Well, white can sacrifice one of his pawns. So white can sacrifice his h pawn by promoting it on the h8 square, and now black is forced to take, otherwise he is losing the game. And now this pawn can easily advance, and now if black tries to attack, it's too late. And now this game is an easy win for white against a lonely bishop. Let's go back to the starting position. So instead of sacrificing h pawn, white can also try to sacrifice the a pawn. So instead of playing h8, white can play a7, threatening to now promote this pawn into a queen. Black needs to stop, and now this pawn can get promoted, and now white can easily win this game with his queen against the bishop. If you are keen to learn about endgames in detail, then do join to the membership program of this channel. And now I would like to end this video with the question of the day. So today's question is, what should black play in this game? Let me know your answers in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, keep practicing.